My name is Tim Johnson, I'm 31, and when I was around one and a half, my parents separated. I was very lucky that my dad decided that he wanted to know his kids. He wanted his kids to know who he was, and he sacrificed a lot of stuff to move over here. He's always lived within 10-15 minutes from myself and my sister. My mum repartnered, and I grew up with my stepdad, who is a great, fantastic guy like my real dad, and he took me on as his own child. And although I had a lot of love in my life and stable parents and a lot of people looking after me, I grew up in a house with a mum who's a fantastic mum. I love her, but she's a party animal. She loves her parties, and so my family grew up always having parties, and that led me always looking for the next form of enjoyment. And it was interesting that at a certain time in my life, I was around 16, God knew me very well, and it's kind of embarrassing to say, but God used my vanity to find my heart. And my mates who were going to a youth group at the time kept trying to get me to come along, and eventually they would talk about how hot the girls were at this youth group, and that was the selling point for me. But it wasn't long before God stole the show at my first youth group outing. I was my first night at St Paul's, Castle Hill. I grew up in the Hills area just around the corner from here, and it wasn't long within that first youth group night that I heard this man, Tim Hawkins, telling me about another man named Jesus, and about Jesus' love for me, and about Jesus' care for me, and that despite me going to parties and trying to find people who liked me, people who would accept me, people who would find me interesting, I heard for the first time about this guy who I never really heard about before, who accepted me for who I was. He was grieved by the stuff that I was doing, but willing to forgive me, willing to love me, and I was intrigued by that. And I didn't understand, why would someone want to do that. So I kept going to the parties and kept having fun, but I kept going to the youth group every Friday night. I didn't have the courage within me to tell my friends that I'd heard something different, something new that they've been trying to tell me about all this time. I kept with the vain line, and kept using the girls as my excuse to go back to youth group. It wasn't long, about 6 months later, after being at this youth group, that I went on a camp, and I wanted to respond to what I heard, and they did the altar call, and come down the front if you want to give your life to Christ. And I went down, and my Bible study leader took me off and spoke to me, and he talked me out of it. And I walked away, I was so angry. And I was like, no, I want God's grace. I want forgiveness. Why won't he give it to me? And we had a 2-week break off youth straight after that, and 2 weeks later I got back to youth and Bible study, and I walked straight up to my leader, and I was really angry at him, and I said, you're wrong. God loves me, and I want his forgiveness, and I'm going to give my life to Christ whether you like it or not. And he had this big smile on his face, and he said, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. But I didn't want to hear a response from a camp where you were hyped up, and I wanted to know for sure. And it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. I've had some great men walking alongside me, pulling my head in where it needs pulling in. God's been good at disciplining me and shaping my heart. And so I'm, like I said, now 31, 3 beautiful kids, a wife, and I look forward to the future, to seeing what God's going to continue to do in my life, and see if he can continue to use that vanity that's still deep within inside me to continue to shape me to the man he wants me to be.